why children are a distinctive category of humans in the legal domain and why they have additional rights and protection and what are the implications of that.
In India, I think about maybe anything between 30 to 40% of our population consists of children. So if we neglect addressing the rights of children or the needs of children, we are neglecting the rights and the needs of about 30 to 40% of the population. If adults in the country have rights, legal rights, social rights, economic rights, why not children?
Absolutely.
So I think the rights of children has come into the focus. That's obviously very good. I just hope it continues.
Can we envision legal empowerment for children?
Oh, yes. I think we need to, perhaps include it in the school curriculum.
A very warm welcome to Justice Lokur. Thank you so much for being here with us. And thank you so much for listeners and watchers that are here today for what I'm sure is going to be a very, very promising conversation. You might be wondering, what is a former Supreme Court judge doing in UNICEF House? Please stay with us and you will hear more. Justice Madan Lokur, is such a privilege for UNICEF to receive you here. You've been a collaborator, you've been a guidance for us, and really in the children's rights space, I don't think you need an introduction. Nevertheless, I'm just going to do it in the interest of the wider audience. Justice Lokur, you've had a very prominent career within the judiciary. Just to give a little bit of a perspective of your journey, you were appointed as additional Solicitor General in India, and then you move on as an additional judge on Delhi High Court. You also acted as a Chief of Justice in Delhi and then performed that role in the High Courts of Guwahati as well as Andhra Pradesh. The Supreme Court received you later as a Supreme Court judge, and something that is very special, of course, for the children's rights agenda was your role as the first Juvenile Justice Committee chairperson of the Supreme Courts. A very unique structure that I look forward to discuss more what it meant in terms of the children's rights space. You spearheaded several initiatives that had a very strong impact, especially in the juvenile justice sector, as well as the child welfare and child protection domain. And of course, you were also author of several landmark judgments that have been and still are a reference in the domain. We need to start this conversation by placing the children's rights agenda within the domain of the human rights space. I read in one of your judgments that children are not miniature adults. They have their own unique needs and rights. So let's start with that. Can I hear from you, Justice Lokur, why children are a distinctive category of humans in the legal domain and why they have additional rights and protection and what are the implications of that?
Yeah, thank you, Sole, for inviting me for this conversation. In India, I think about maybe anything between 30 to 40% of our population consists of children, right? So if we neglect addressing the rights of children or the needs of children, we are neglecting, the rights and the needs of about 30 to 40% of the population, which is a huge amount. Okay, and so therefore, I think we need to spend time, all of us, the society needs to spend time in advocacy for the rights of children, to recognize that they have rights. If adults in the country have rights, okay, legal rights, social rights, economic rights, why not children? They're not a separate category of human beings. So I think that is perhaps the most important area that we have to address. That is one way of looking at it. The other way of looking at it is that children are the future of the country. So are we going to neglect the future of the country if we neglect children? I don't think any country would like to neglect its own future. So if we spend time with children, we are trying to build the future of the country, and that is, I think, extremely important as well. It's the next generation, so to speak, and we can't forget about that.
Thank you, Justice Lokur. And really a very strong reminder that the foundation of a nation, especially in the context of India, you were talking about 1/3 of the population being children. And actually, just to add another dimension, 1/5 child in the world are in India. So when we define the path of children's rights in India, to a large extent, we are having a very critical and ripple effect in what is the children's rights situation, and of course, India's role in the contribution towards the sustainable development goals is critical. I was recently in an event where I learned that every day 63,000 Indians
Children are born every day.
born.
Yeah.
And you know what it means? That if we're going to spend, let's say, an hour, you and I sitting, by the time we finish the hour, 5,000 new Indians will be received. So that's the magnitude of the responsibility that we have. It's also good to remind ourselves that children are the future generation, but I don't resist to bring the voices of what they keep telling us, that they're the future, but they're also the present, and how we define our present is going to determine the future. But can I ask you, we were talking about the magnitude, the size of the shared population, the implications on a nation of how we treat our children. It reminds me also, the Universal Declaration of Children's Rights said something very powerful, that humanity owes to its children the best it has to offer. Are we living up to that commitment? Do you feel that society stakeholders are conscious of not only the big responsibility, but the big implications and the impact that children's rights will have in chartering the future of any nation?
Well, in India, it's beginning to take shape. All right, beginning in the sense, maybe about 10, 15 years ago, things were beginning to take shape in several respects. You see, for example, something like child labor. All right, I think civil society realized, the government realized, that child labor is something which should be abolished. All right, so we had legislation for that. Then you have the right to education. Children need to be educated. I mean, everybody needs to be educated, and you start with children. So we have, the right to education. These kind of things. Then you have the Juvenile Justice Act, for children who are in need of care and protection, children who are in conflict with the law. We have a very progressive legislation so far as children are concerned. Then you have the issue of, child marriages. Okay, that's also a huge problem. So, a lot of these things have been coming into focus over the last maybe 10, 15, maybe 20 years. And that has begun to make a change, in the sense that people are now talking about it. They're doing things about it. There are, universities who are doing some research on it. There are civil society organizations, NGOs, who are doing something about it. So I think the rights of children has come into the focus, and that's obviously very good, and I just hope it continues. But I must also say that, while this awareness has come about, there is a bit of a problem in the implementation of the laws, to some extent. For example, you would have childcare institutions. Are they providing, good food to the children? What about the conditions in which they are living? Are they satisfactory? What about hygiene? What about sanitation? Medical assistance, right? So these are things that you need to look at. At the same time, you also have street children. A lot of them are just on the streets. You have the rights of disabled children. Are we looking at that? So, a lot of these things are being talked about. So there is this churn in society, with regard to child rights, which, things are moving slowly, but they're moving. Okay, so I think that's a very positive thing.
So are you optimistic?
Yeah, I am optimistic. Yeah.
Excellent. That's good to hear, and I think is undeniable the impressive progress that the country has advanced, not only, as you said, from the perspective of building the right legal and policy architecture with very strong and robust acts. Of course, the Juvenile Justice Act, the POSCO, among many others, but also some important policies like Mission Vatsalya, Mission Shakti, and other elements. You talked about children in institutions, and I wanted you to reflect a little bit on that. In your journey as the chairperson of the Supreme Court Juvenile Justice Committee, you were really a champion in the space of the alternative care agenda and the domain of children in need of care and protection. There's been very overwhelming evidence that has come globally as well as in the country of the implications of keeping children in institutions, being in institutions because of the need of care and protection, or being in detention in the context of children in conflict with the law. You have a very, not only ground experience chairing the committees, but something that I think all the children's rights activists recognize is your involvement, your visits to childcare institutions, the experiences that you have in the first hand. What is your reflection in terms of the roles that childcare institutions play, and what kind of alternative care reform and provisions you think are important to advance to really uphold the principle of institutionalization as a measure of last resort?
Okay. I'll give you two examples of observation homes, and I'll give you two examples of shelter homes or children's homes. Now, an observation home is, where a child in conflict with law is kept while the inquiry is pending. Okay. They're entitled to bail, okay, even during the course of the inquiry, which is pending before the Juvenile Justice Board. But even for that period, maybe 15 days, maybe a month, they are in an observation home. Now, the first time I visited an observation home in Delhi was sometime, I think, in maybe 2007, 2008 or something. And what I found over there was that there was enough space for 100 children. There were 4 dormitories with an occupancy of 25 each. So space for 100. But there were actually 258 children over there. Okay, so more than 2.5 times. And I spoke to the Juvenile Justice Board and I said, this is not acceptable. And I requested them, and they agreed, to review all those 258 cases. And they found that many of the children, the maximum punishment for a violation under the juvenile justice laws is 3 years of custody. And there were some who were there for 5 years, Now that is totally unacceptable. Others who were there, their cases were pending, forgotten, so to speak, for months. And when the Juvenile Justice Board reviewed all these 258 cases, they realized that 210 of them need not have been in the observation home. So the population of the observation home came down from 258 to 48. Okay. So that, I think, is it definitely shocked me. But that's how the system was working. Like I said, I'm talking about 2007, 2008. The second instance is about a place outside Delhi where I had been to the observation home, again for children who against whom inquiries were pending. And I was shocked to find that they had no water, they had no electricity, right? I went to the toilets and I found that there were no doors in the toilets. There was no water and there were no doors. And I asked the superintendent, I said, what's going on? How can children live in this kind of a situation? And he said, what can I do? It's for the government to decide, or for the municipal authorities to make available things like that. And then I started speaking to the children. I called them. I said, I'd like to, have your experiences. And we were sitting in a room and there was one bulb over there. So I asked the children, I said, listen, you said there's no electricity, but how come there's a bulb over here? And they said, they've put up this bulb and given electricity only because you are here, right? Otherwise, there's no electricity. So that was the condition. All right. Subsequently, I spoke to the Chief Justice of that state and things improved. Now, two experiences that I have of shelter homes or children's homes, where you have children who are in need of care and protection. So they could be, very small children, in some instances, infants. It could be, teenagers. Okay. So there also, the conditions were not satisfactory in the sense that, there was overcrowding. But what I want to point out is that some students whom I happened to meet over there, studying in the Indian Institute of Technology in Delhi, they had come and I asked them, I said, what are you doing over here? So they said, we've come here to teach the children how to use computers, right? So students took time off from their institute to spend time with the children and to teach them how to use computers, which shows that humanity still exists in that sense. All right. I'm hopeful that things will improve. Why will they improve? Because we are talking about it. We are discussing it. Not only UNICEF, they're doing excellent work. The first 4 years of the sort of awareness campaign was spearheaded by UNICEF. So that, and I think the judiciary is very deeply involved. The government is also doing its bit. So yeah, things are changing.
Things are moving in the right direction.
Yeah.
But thank you for sharing some sobering examples of the still big unfinished agendas and the complexity of the child protection space. I think one of the big challenges, despite the progress, and I think it's undeniable that there's been an improvement, for example, in infrastructure, in establishment of oversight mechanisms, but it's still oftentimes issues around children, particularly vulnerable children, which are the ones that typically end up connected with the child protection system, victims of child labor, child marriage, exploitation. And still, a lot of time, children issues are considered within the private domain, right? It's considered that is for families to sort them. A lot of times are surrounded by stigma, by secrecy. I think the national data is overwhelming in India as well in other contexts, that a lot of the experiences of violence happen within the inner circle. And unfortunately, when a child is also in an institution, some of these extends and some of those vulnerability extends, you were talking about the importance of us talking about it, raising awareness. So I want you to reflect a little bit more on that aspect. What do you think that the large society should do in terms of the role that they have to play to bring visibility to children's rights issues, and especially if some of those hidden issues that happen in the margins of society that we don't talk enough, issues of violence, of exploitation. Child marriage is changing, as you said, but still there is an agenda to follow. What should the general public do about this?
Yeah, I believe that discussion and dialogue can make a big difference. So now you were mentioning about things being hidden. Okay, yes, you're right. Things are being hidden in the sense that there is not much talk about something like domestic violence, not only between a man and a woman, but domestic violence against children. All right. Um, we don't talk about child sexual abuse, the impact of child sexual abuse. A lot of instances of rape are committed by persons who are known to the victim or are members of the family of the victim or the extended family of the victim, and nobody wants to talk about it. Okay, because of stigma, right? What will happen? Now, there are instances that I've come across where, a girl has been sexually violated. And the school says that, listen, you're not the right kind of student. So she's not allowed to, go to school, or the school does not give her admission. So she has to go somewhere else. And that other school will ask her that, why have you come here? Then what is she supposed to say? Okay, because if she tells the truth, she will not get admission over there as well. So stigma, is something which stops discussions, and that stigma is not only within a closed society such as the family or the neighborhood. People have had to shift from the neighborhood, but also in public spaces like schools. Okay, it's also in workplaces. All right. So I think one of the things that has to be done is to tell society that, listen, these are victims of crime. They're not perpetrators. And let me tell you, this is one of the earliest problems that we had. What used to happen in Delhi at one point of time was that if the police would raid a brothel, okay, they would pick up the girls from there and charge them with violation of the law. Why? Because you're doing something illegal. And we had to tell the police and convince them, which they eventually agreed, that, listen, they're not, doing it because they want to do it. They're doing it because they're forced to do it. They're not happy in a brothel. So please don't treat them as, criminals, but treat them as victims of crime. And after some discussion, the police, readily agreed. And I think their practice of, treating these kind of girls and women as victims of crime has now taken root. So this kind of a message, must go to schools, must go to workplaces, must go to housing societies, must go everywhere, generally speaking. That, this will, I think, take away stigma to some extent, or bring about, acceptance, or bring about, a feeling that, yeah, what this girl has done is not wrong. She's a victim of crime. I think that can make a difference.
Absolutely. And I really think that this appeal of breaking the silence is especially important for our audience and listeners to really remind ourselves a very, very powerful message, I think, that is coming here, that if you see something, do something. I think we all really have a responsibility to break the silence and break the silos that surround a lot of times the victims of violence,
Yeah.
and all of these issues that are, of course, constrained, and really also hoping that the message of empowerment also for children and young people, that whenever there is some wrongdoing happening, there will always be a trustable adult and someone that they can lean on and seek justice. We focus a little bit on the domain of the access to justice, both in itself as a fundamental right, but also as a very, very important vehicle to realize children's rights. In principle, justice can be a very effective vehicle to address discrimination and stigma, as we were talking, inequalities, also, of course, to redress wrongdoings, as we've talked, and seek remedies. Nevertheless, the reality, especially when it comes to children, tend to be particularly difficult. I think the justice system always struggles to meet its objective. And a lot of times, you were talking about the example of the brothers, what we see is that when a child enters in the justice system with the purpose of seeking remedies, it ends up being re-victimized. And there is so many experiences. We were recently, you and I, in a forum where there was a lot of heartbreaking experiences of children giving testimonies, regretting that they came forward, right, to share the testimony and seek justice. Why do you think the domain of justice for children is so important and yet so difficult to realize?
There is no doubt about it. You have the act called the POSCO Act. I've dealt with some cases, and I have even otherwise come to know of some cases where a girl has, become pregnant after being raped. All right. Now, the law says, and judgments of the court say that she's entitled to compensation. Okay, one is abortion, that's one aspect. The other is compensation. Now, we had this case, where a young girl, she was about 13 or so. She had been raped by her uncle. And it was too late for her to abort. And so we said that, she should be given compensation because she has to look after herself. She has to look after the child. And we asked the legal aid authorities that you please, sanction the compensation. And what we were told was that she is number 33 in the queue. So there are 32 other girls who are in the same situation. And how about giving compensation to them also, So we said, of course you're supposed to give it to everybody. That is one aspect. The other aspect is, going to court, right? In this case, going to the Juvenile Justice Board. Are the children who are in conflict with law, are they adequately represented? Many of them, come from poor families. Let's face it, that's what happens. Many of them come from poor families. Their parents can't afford the lawyer's fees. All right. But they want good legal assistance. So, there are instances where families have had to sell, their property or, some such thing. That's one aspect, where legal aid is given. And, we have a pretty vibrant legal aid system in the country. But the feedback that I've been getting is that, children are not being given the kind of, quality legal aid which they deserve. All right. First of all, like I said, most of the children who are in conflict with law or who are produced before the Juvenile Justice Board, are children who come from poor families. All right. Many of them are, illiterate or semi-literate. Okay. So they don't know what's going on in the Juvenile Justice Board. And they need a lawyer to tell them what is going on. There have been instances, of course, in every criminal justice system where a person has been wrongly, accused of a crime. That happens to children also. How does a child then express his point of view to the Juvenile Justice Board? Okay. So, and then, you have sometimes the Juvenile Justice Board says that, all right, we are going to inquire into all this, but we are sending you to the observation home for children until the inquiry is over. So the child is put in a sort of a, custodial place. There are instances where children have been produced before a court, not before a Juvenile Justice Board. They've been produced before a court and they've been sent to an adult prison. Okay, and it is much later, maybe a month later, maybe 2 months later, that somebody realizes that, listen, this fellow is a child. I mean, he doesn't deserve to be in a regular adult prison. And then the child is transferred to, an observation home or a place of safety or some such place. So these are challenges, that children face when they're dealing with justice or access to justice. That needs to be strengthened. We need to strengthen access to justice for children. Make sure that they get quality legal assistance. All right. I keep saying that, legal aid for the poor should not be poor legal aid. So I think that is very, very important as far as I'm concerned.
And maybe we can use that to say that legal aid for children should not be a minor legal aid.
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. Yeah.
Do you think we can talk of legal aid and take one step forward, particularly with children? They are sponges, right? They are in this phase in life that they are absorbing value systems, principles, ethics. Can we envision legal empowerment for children?
Oh, yes. I think we need to, perhaps include it in the school curriculum. There was a judgment given by the Supreme Court, I think it was in the 1980s, probably 84, 85 or something, when issues pertaining to the environment, were at the center stage. And the Supreme Court gave a direction that school children should be taught about the environment. And, environment has become a part of the students' curriculum. So similarly, I don't see why it is difficult, for the administrators to say that, listen, we are going to teach children about child rights, about the empowerment of children. It can be done and it should be done, empowerment of the girl child.
Absolutely.
Why not? So, the more you talk about this, the more of a change you'll bring in society.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's very interesting how the education system is evolving, focusing more on life skills, what we call 21st century skills, how we're incorporated elements of emotional intelligence, how we are incorporating financial literacy. So why not, right, to incorporate principles of understanding that we are citizens, how to claim our rights, understand that we are right holders, including as a child, as a boy, as a girl, and how to claim those rights. Which brings me back, Justice Lokur, before you were talking a little bit of the role that society has, and we were making a call for our audience, especially if there are children and young people out there, to always say something when they see something. But maybe we I want to ask you, what would be your message if there is a child, a young person hearing us that feel that their rights might be violated, or they have issues that they need to reach and raise from the legal perspective? What would be the message to them, especially, for example, if perhaps they don't have a supported family environment? What would be the message to them?
Yes. What you've asked is a pretty difficult question. I mean, the answer is difficult. You see, it's like this. If a child is in a problem, okay, at home or even in school, okay, whom is he going to talk to, or whom is she going to talk to? Now, I would imagine that it's difficult for that child to talk to another child, unless they're fairly grown up, 16, 17 or so. But if it's somebody who's maybe 10, 11 years old or younger, in whom will they confide? And what will they do? Now, as I see it, the only person that they can talk to who can perhaps do something about it is an adult. So unless adults are sensitized to the rights of children, to the problems that children face or they might face, there's going to be a problem. So, schools, for example, the teachers need to be sensitized. The head of the institution, the principal or the headmaster or the headmistress, they need to be sensitized. I had mentioned to you about a girl who was not admitted to school. Why? Because she'd been raped or she'd been sexually abused, right? And she might be a bad influence on the other girls. Okay, so if that is the kind of attitude, then there's a problem. So the sensitization must be within the schools, within housing societies. Okay, there was a time when, domestic violence, where the husband would beat up the wife and the neighbors would say, listen, this is not our problem. Why should we get involved? It's their domestic problem. They should get involved. But when discussions started happening about domestic violence and when the law came, then the neighbors kind of woke up and said that, listen, what you're doing is not correct. All right. And if you do this, we're going to tell the police. So I don't know to what extent domestic violence still persists, but I'm sure the Domestic Violence Act has made a difference. So similarly for children, if somebody in the neighborhood beats up a child for not doing homework or for misbehaving and so on, and if the neighbors speak up and say that, listen, this is not on, even the child has rights. So what if he's made a mistake? Everybody makes mistakes. That by itself can make a difference. So you will have, resident welfare associations, you will have schools, you have community halls in many places where these kind of discussions can take place. You can have, programs like this, which UNICEF is conducting. So maybe other civil society organizations and other groups, can have discussions of this nature. So I think at the end of the day, awareness is important, knowledge is important. So then the child will have the confidence that, listen, I can go and tell my teacher. I can go and tell the police if it becomes necessary. So the police also has to be sensitized. You have a, SJPU, that is some juvenile protection unit. Okay. But the police has to be to also be sensitized.
Yeah. Maybe I was thinking, Justice Lokur, that we were talking about legal empowerment for children, but maybe it's also important to extend that children's rights literacy has to be spread across, especially the first line of respondents, right? We're talking about the role of teachers, of course, the importance of parenting programs, because a lot of what happens, both from the perspective of violations, but also the protection measures, of course, happens within the spectrum of the family, and then of course the police. Thank you for bringing that very important stakeholder. Of course, you've been working very closely with the police. So we have, as UNICEF, because we really understand that they're the first port of entry when a child enters in contact with the law in one way or another. And the experience of a child in the justice system a lot of times is defined, or at least the police have a strong role in how the child and the family are going to be perceiving the justice structure. Justice Lokur, you talked and you gave a very good overview of the ways in which children enter in contact with the law. They can be victims, but they can also be offenders. But nevertheless, when you share some of the examples, it feels that there is underlying causes, and it seems that the patterns and the backgrounds of the children that enter in contact with the law as victims and offenders tend to be very similar. I don't know if you would agree with this statement that a child in detention is not a problem. It is a symptom that the society has.
Yes.
What are your reflections in terms of these two categories of children being very distinctive and yet sharing a lot of intersection of commonalities and vulnerabilities?
Yeah. The way I look at it is that every child who is in conflict with the law as an offender, so to speak, is a child in need of care and protection. People don't commit an offense, deliberately. I mean, you may have, psychopaths and things like that, but children don't normally. Okay? So if a child has committed an offense, then the child needs some care and protection. Why has that child committed an offense? Okay? Now, you could take a small thing, there are different kinds of offenses. A child not going to school. Okay, as far as the school is concerned, it's an offense. The child not doing homework. It's an offense as far as the teacher is concerned. Why haven't you done your homework? You should be punished for that. But you have to go behind that. Why has the child not done the homework? There must be a reason for it. Okay? Why has a child skipped school? There must be a reason for it. Then you go into other kind of offenses, theft. Why has the child committed a theft? Perhaps, the company that the child keeps is not good. Okay? Why has the child, committed rape? Okay? There has to be some reason for it. So once you get into that, then you realize that the child needs care and protection. So that is, an aspect of care and protection for the child, which I think is very, very important. And you have to get into the background to find out why it has happened. So the system, the juvenile justice system, has to be geared up for this in all aspects, whether it's a juvenile justice board, whether it's a child welfare committee, whether it's probation officers, whether it's the police and so on.
Apparatus.
Yeah, the entire, they have to get into this. There are instances, I can tell you, when a child is framed. All right. I know that when I was in Guwahati, as you had mentioned, I had been to another town called Jorhat. And I went to the, observation home where child are accused of having committed an offense. I met a child and I asked him, I said, what is it that you are supposed to have done? He said, I don't know what I'm supposed to have done. Now, why I met this child was that UNICEF in Assam, they had organized a painting competition. And one painting was very good and it had come out in the, magazine prepared by UNICEF. So I had requested that, if I could meet the child who has made that painting. And I was told the child is in the observation home in Jorhat. So when I went there, I said, I'd like to meet this child. So he said, I don't know why I'm here, you know. So I asked the superintendent and all that. I said, do you know why he's here? They said, no, we don't know. We're not sure. The Juvenile Justice Board sent him over here. So as the Chief Justice of the state, I called for the records of the case. Now, what I found was that the allegation against him was that he had stolen a cycle, right? And he was a habitual thief, Cycle was one, he had stolen other things in the past. And that's why he was detained. The Juvenile Justice Board had called for a social investigation report, SIR. The SIR indicated that he was a very well-behaved child. He was an orphan and he was living with the family. The family said he's very well-behaved. The children in the neighborhood said he's very well-behaved. The teachers in the school said he's, a very good student. So the SIR was a complete opposite of what the allegations against him were, and the Juvenile Justice Board didn't look at the SIR. All right. So now this child had obviously been framed, because all the other children also said that, listen, we've not heard of this fellow being a thief. So the question of his stealing a bike and all that didn't arise. So you have instances like that. I had one instance in Delhi as well, where a child had committed a theft. I mean, two brothers, they had committed a theft. They were suitably punished. Next time when there was a theft, the police said, listen, it's these two guys, without bothering to investigate. So you have frame-ups also. So I think the whole thing has to be, looked at to understand actually what is happening and, what can be done.
Very interesting. Justice Lokur, your anecdotes just bringing you to mind. When I was in law school, I remember this book by Julia Fiona around juvenile justice that it was called Devil or Angels. And it was a very interesting proposition that I've been reflecting in my career in UNICEF, working on children's rights and justice, that it seems that society oftentimes tend to put in boxes, in very extreme boxes, childhood and children. They can either be angels, right, of full innocence, but otherwise, the moment that there is some deviation in behavior, they become immediately devils. And I think it's very interesting for those of us that work in the space of children's rights and justice for children, how also society devilized a little bit the child offender. And I think it was a very interesting reflection that a lot of times we don't understand some of the background. And also how oftentimes we tend to perhaps overuse the criminal justice as a resource for some deviation that might not merit that amount of reaction from the justice system. And I would like to reflect on this a little bit. Why do you think that that there is this dichotomy in the way that society and therefore the justice system sees children, and why there tends to be this sometimes over-criminalization and overuse of justice system for the correction of behaviors that might not actually amount to criminal offenses? And you were talking that a lot of times when you peel the onion, you realize that there is a social context, and what the child needs is actually social welfare systems to enter and support. They might come from deprived context, and sort of that level of understanding is not there, and we don't connect enough sometimes the justice system with the child protection system to really act on the best interest of the child, which is the principle upon which the entire children's right architecture is built.
Yes. This sort of a situation is, sometimes very difficult to resolve. When you talk about the best interests of the child, there are instances where the father of the child thinks that this is in the best interest of the child. But the mother thinks that no, something else is in the best interest of the child. So within the family itself, between the father and the mother, there can be a difference of opinion.
The child is in between.
And the child is in between. Yeah. So you look at that, I mean, this is one family issue, but then you look at it in society. How best do you look after children? And that is a dilemma that the justice system always faces. The thought is that, let's not have a trial, like you have in a criminal case. So even if a child has committed an offense, it should be an inquiry. It should not be a trial. Okay. Um, then you have, if the child has to be put in custody, it should be in an observation home, not in a jail or in a prison. Okay. The inquiry should be completed quickly. The law says, the Juvenile Justice Act says that you should try and complete the inquiry within 4 months or 6 months. The punishment is less. All right. But the Juvenile Justice Act also makes a distinction if, a sort of an offense is committed, a heinous offense is committed between the ages of 16 and 18, then in some cases, the child can be sent to an adult court. Now, there was a lot of discussion and debate about sending a child to a children's court if he's between 16 and 18. So whether that is right or whether that is wrong is always a subject matter of debate. Whether a child should be given, 3 years punishment or it should be more, again, it's a matter of debate. Why 3 years? Why not more? All right. We had a very horrific case in India, in Delhi, which is commonly known as the Nirbhaya case, where a child was one of those who was alleged to have raped this girl, gang raped, part of a gang rape. Because he was a child, he got a maximum of 3 years in custody. And that time there was a hue and cry saying that, listen, how could this guy get away with only 3 years? The law was amended later on to say that if the child is between 16 and 18, then perhaps adult court and maybe longer punishment. So when you talk about the best interests of the child, there are a lot of issues that need to be looked at. It could be psychological, it could be psychosocial, it could be economic, it could be, the society in which the child is brought up. All these things, have to be looked at before taking a decision. Okay. Now, if you have a child who's a victim of a crime, a young girl who's 4 years old, 5 years old, we've had cases like that. How is she going to explain what has happened? So the whole justice system has to look at these issues, psychosocial issues, issues pertaining to economic concerns, education, child labor. Why is a child working? A 7-year-old or 8-year-old child, why is he working? Why is he not going to school? Is a school available? Or is it because of some economic condition that the child is working? So when you talk about access to justice, it's not only, a victim of a crime or a person who has committed an offense. It could also be a child who is in need of care and protection. So there you have a third category. You have children roaming around on the streets. You have children who have run away from their home and are found in the railway station. Why have they run away? They've not committed any offense, but maybe there's a problem with their father and mother.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, absolutely. And I think even the way in which the justice, the legal frameworks operate, uh, to the extent of some of the children actually entering under state legal custody, right? That's the level of responsibility that sometimes the state takes in regards to child caring, right? I'm talking about children that are either orphans or children whose parents or extended family are not in a position to take care of the children. So that's the level of importance that that the justice and the legal frameworks have in the life of many children, actually. Jasper, I want to ask you a little bit about what are the learnings and the experience that you carried during your tenure as a chairperson of the Juvenile Justice Committee within the Supreme Court. And maybe before I hear from you, just to really emphasize that from UNICEF, we recognize the very unique role that the Supreme Court in India and the high courts of the country have taken up in terms of upholding, advancing children's rights in the way of providing oversight and guidance for the implementation of the Juvenile Justice Act, the POSCO Act, and other related legal provisions in the country for children. That is a very, very unique model. Many countries are approaching us. As you know, we've had the opportunity to invite you, Justice Lokur, to some of the fora to share some of the experience. So really would like to also extend this podcast as an opportunity for our audiences to learn what is the role that the Supreme Court has had and what are some of the learnings and reflections, and in your view, what we should do more. You were talking about the partnership that UNICEF has had in this space, what we should do more to take this partnership and this role of the high judiciary of the country forward.
Sometime in 2013 or 14, around that time, I had felt, because of my experience with juvenile justice issues in the Delhi High Court, that we should have one at the level of the Supreme Court. Why not?
Committee, right?
A committee of the Juvenile Justice Committee. So I spoke to the Chief Justice of India, and he, of course, readily agreed and said that yes, we should have a Juvenile Justice Committee in the Supreme Court as well. So that's how I became the first person to head the Juvenile Justice Committee in the Supreme Court. Now, the idea was to send the message of child rights across the country, and get all the NGOs together, get the juvenile justice committees of the high courts wherever they were existing, and if they were not existing, then for the high courts to start juvenile justice committees and to hold programs. And the best resource was UNICEF. So I had a discussion with UNICEF, and UNICEF said, yeah, we'll sponsor programs for a period of 4 years, and 4 times a year, and one national program at the end of the year. So through the support given by UNICEF, we organized 16 regional programs and 4 national programs, 20 programs in all, and got all the courts in the country involved, the juvenile justice boards, the child welfare committees, the NGOs, governments, police, I mean, everybody, and the message then spread that yes, children also have rights. Children also need to be empowered. And, it just took off from there. Of course, during these regional conferences and national conference, UNICEF documented some of the problems and some of the issues and some of the good practices, right? And these were circulated to everybody. So, various states could, adopt a practice, and they would be told that, listen, this is what you have done, which is not, is not in the best interest of the child. So please rethink. That I think made a big difference. So really, coming back to, the idea of spreading awareness, it has to be a collective effort. So everybody has to be involved in it. And of course, the biggest resource would be the, government, whether it's the government of India, whether it's the state government. All of us, whether we are individuals or whether we are NGOs or whether it is UNICEF or other, organizations, can play a supporting role. And that's how the message, can be spread. So far as the Supreme Court is concerned, or the Juvenile Justice Committee of the Supreme Court is concerned, that is the peg, on which all this can be done. Because they are in the Juvenile Justice Committee of the Supreme Court is in charge of, it's not in charge of, but is in communication with the Juvenile Justice Committees of all the high courts. So they get a feedback. And many of the high courts, have a secretariat to look into issues of child rights, because they have to see, whether the juvenile justice boards are functioning all right in the state, whether the child welfare committees are working all right, whether the observation homes are okay, whether the children's homes are okay. So it's a huge, administrative job. Okay. The state government, of course, is also doing it, but so is the Juvenile Justice Committee of the High Court. So some of them, and this is what I had advocated, that there must be a secretariat, that can look into these issues, whether they're policy issues or whether they're administrative issues or they're day-to-day issues. And all this feedback, then comes to the Supreme Court Juvenile Justice Committee. It comes first to the High Court Juvenile Justice Committee, and from there it comes to the, Supreme Court Juvenile Justice Committee. And of course, the High Court Juvenile Justice Committees are in touch with the, concerned department, Social Welfare Department or Women and Child Department of the state. And the Supreme Court Juvenile Justice Committee is in touch with the Women and Child Development Department of the Government of India. So once that, cohesion takes place, I think we'll be able to move forward much faster than we have been doing.
Even more so.
Yeah.
Thank you, Justice Lokur. And first of all, from UNICEF side, we feel extremely humble and privileged to have walked this journey. And of course, you were the person that really spearheaded this. I think UNICEF team remembers when we were discussing in the beginning, we thought that perhaps we could start with few states, few high courts, and how you were very clear that this had to be pan-India. You really push us to elevate the level of ambition as children really demanded. And we're sitting here a decade after. It's a children's rights movement that is underpinned by the judiciary, but it's been really commendable the way in which the judiciary and the executive has established a partnership and a dialogue, of course, always respecting the different distinctive roles that they have. Not only that, but have also embraced a whole society approach in this endeavor of advancing children's rights and the implementation of the strong, robust legal frameworks that the country have. UNICEF is in its 75th birthday. We're still children at heart, nevertheless. And as you've been, as I said before, a guidance and mentor to us, I don't want to leave this space without asking you, what do you think, what advice, what reflections you have in terms of the role that UNICEF plays and wants to play in India, and not only for UNICEF, but for every children's rights organization and stakeholder in the country? What we should do more and what we should focus more on?
Yes. First of all, I must place on record the fantastic support that UNICEF has given. All right, I had mentioned about those 16 regional conferences, and now you say 9 national consultations. This would not have been possible without the support of UNICEF. All right, and just think about it. When I spoke to UNICEF in 2014, and UNICEF had said at that point of time, sorry, we can't help you. Where would, child rights movement have been? Perhaps nowhere. So I must place on record the extremely, valuable support that UNICEF has given in every respect. What more can UNICEF do? That's the question that you're asking. UNICEF has been able to bring all these NGOs together. And in your own way, you have been, assisting NGOs to carry out, research work. Data is important. All right. Unless we have adequate data, we can't frame policy. Policies can't be framed on the basis of what you hear. You need data, whether it's, about children who are on the streets, children in the railway stations, children who are in conflict with the law, juvenile justice boards, and so on. I think if this entire thing is compiled, and disseminated, broadly, it's going to make a big difference. There has to be this dialogue and discussion about what is going on. What are we doing for our children? UNICEF has done tremendous work in terms of, nutrition, in terms of education. Okay. So you really have to continue doing that work, but disseminate the information much more, because awareness, like I said, is the key. As long as people are, when they are aware of their rights, when they're aware of, the possibility of empowerment of children, I think that by itself can make a huge difference. So yes, 75th birthday, happy birthday. And please continue the extremely good work that you've been doing.
Thank you so much, Justice Lokur. And of course, with the strong allies like you, Supreme Court, High Courts, and many, many other stakeholders in the country, we really look forward for what the next 75 years have ready for us, and of course for the children of India. And thank you so much for all the listeners that have been here with us. We knew that this conversation was not going to disappoint. I really carry with me very, very strong, powerful messages from Justice Madan Lokur. First of all, children might be victims, children might be offenders, children might enter in contact with the law, but they're first and foremost children. And justice, including for children, is also a universal right for all of them that needs to be realized. Not only that, but there is a need and an importance that we work with the justice sector, with the child protection sector, and all the stakeholders to make sure that justice is a platform for children to be listened to, for their voices to be heard rather than being silenced. Thank you so much, Justice Lokur.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for your time, and we really look forward to continue our journey together.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.